Hello everyone, and welcome to another Cut Rate Commander Precon Upgrade Guide, the series where we take a look at Precon decks and bring them up to cut rate standards. My name is Grazzet, and today we'll be looking at the Growing Threat Precon from March of the Machine and its face commander, Brimaz, Blight of Oreskos, which we'll be bringing up from its roughly $40 price point to an increased budget of $75 after upgrades. But before we continue, just a quick reminder that, at the time of uploading this, the channel's 10k subscriber giveaway is still going and has been extended to April 29th, in which one lucky winner will have the opportunity to win a $100 Urtet Remnant of Memnarch deck built by yours truly, as well as a plethora of accessories and upgrades for it. So if you're interested in signing up for your chance to win, be sure to check out the link above or in the description for the full build and how to enter. Additionally, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you like this content and would like me to continue making more videos like this in the future. And if you're feeling particularly generous, please consider buying me a coffee at the link in the description to keep me caffeinated as I work on more of these builds. Also, be sure to stick around until the end of the video to see which Precon upgrade we'll be covering next. So, with that out of the way, let's start by taking a look at the commander and playstyle. Brimaz Blight of Oreskos is a 3/4 Phyrexian cat that costs 2 and Orzhov and has the following abilities. Firstly, whenever we cast a Phyrexian creature or artifact creature spell, incubate X, where X is the spell's mana value. And secondly, at the beginning of each end step, if a Phyrexian died under our control, proliferate. Breaking down his core stats, Brimaz possesses a mid-weight CMC, a slightly below average stat block for his cost, and a pair of abilities that focus around Phyrexian and/or artifact creatures to get us additional potential bodies into play, while also multiplying the +1/+1 counters on said bodies as our Phyrexian tribe members die off, as well as multiplying any other counters already in play. Taking a closer look at his first ability, it effectively gives us a free vanilla Phyrexian artifact body every time we cast a Phyrexian or artifact creature spell whose stats scale with the spell's CMC, with the caveat that we have to pay 2 to turn it into a creature, easily allowing us to passively build up a massive board presence as we cast our tribe members at no mana cost or limit per turn, and the fact that our incubator tokens are not creatures until we pay the 2 actually being a blessing in disguise, as, so long as they're in our back row, they'll be immune to most forms of conventional creature removal and wipes, giving us the ability to simply bring them online after we've been wiped to instantly rebuild our board on the cheap, or instead turn them into creatures on our opponent's turns to use them as surprise blockers or grant them pseudo haste to swing in with. This then pairs nicely with Brimaz's second ability, in which we get a free proliferate per turn so long as one of our Phyrexians died on said turn, easily allowing Brimaz to not only get additional +1/+1 counters on the incubator tokens he creates, but also multiply any other types of counters we happen to be distributing or generating, such as charge counters, loyalty counters, oil counters, or even poison counters, enabling us to get quite a bit of value from our counters quite easily, especially when considering that our colors have no shortage of ways to sack our creatures at instant speed, so we don't have to rely on our opponents to trigger the ability. So, as we can see, Brimaz at his core is a tribal commander that deeply cares about counters, using Phyrexians and artifacts to create counter-laden tokens that he can grow as his tribe members die off, while incidentally multiplying other types of counters in the process. The problem, however, is that the base build seems to have a split base, with half the deck dedicated to artifacts and artifact support, and the other half dedicated to Phyrexians and Phyrexian support, leaving the deck out of the box feeling disjointed as a result and clunky to play. So, in order to make this deck feel more cohesive, I decided to take this build fully in a Phyrexian Tribal direction with a counter subtheme, cutting most of the non-Phyrexian artifact creatures in the core build that would not proc our commanders proliferate, and adding in more Phyrexians with incubate to further grow our board, others that can generate or distribute counters for Brimaz to multiply, and a tribal token generating Phyrexians to get us expendable Phyrexian bodies into play to easily proc our commanders proliferate. Then, after adding in some additional non-creature sources of proliferate and sack outlets to supplement our commander's proliferate game plan further, and upgrading our core stats to more on-theme sources that better benefit and enable our sack and proliferate heavy game plan, we're left with a solid tribal deck that can build up powerful board states to swing in with, keep in reserve until they're needed, or simply sack away for value, all while we continue to multiply the counters in play until either our incubated creatures are too powerful to be stopped, or our opponents succumb to their poison, whichever comes first. So let us planeswalk to Theros, where we'll find Brimaz, king of the Leonin Prides, doing what he always has, leading his people. When the glorious completion of the plane first began, in his ignorance, he resisted, rallying his people to oppose the Phyrexian forces. It was his old friend Ajani, however, who at the time he was shocked to see leading the Phyrexian forces, that made him see the truth. That this was not an invasion, but a liberation. They would no longer be subjugated to the wills of fickle gods and no longer isolated from the humans. Instead, they would all be one in glorious completion. And even as he lay broken at his feet for foolishly standing against him, Ajani, in his infinite compassion, gave him the opportunity to right the wrongs he had committed against Elish Norn. Now, with a fully repaired and newly completed body, he still reigns over his people, unifying them under the Phyrexian banner as they emerge from their incubation pods and leading them against those ignorant fools hiding behind the walls of Meletis even while their gods abandon them to join the liberation. But they, just like him, would see the truth in due time, and join them in glorious completion, even if they, just like him, had to be dragged to the incubation pods in pieces. So, now that we have a better understanding of the commander and playstyle, let's take a look at the cards we'll be keeping from the base build. Beginning with our kept creatures, since we'll be shifting this build into a Phyrexian Tribal one, we'll be holding on to the best Phyrexians out of the box for us to further build upon with our new additions. For example, we'll be retaining the new Phyrexian additions, those being completed Huntmaster, who serves as an additional source of incubator tokens as well as an easy-to-enable sack outlet to enable our commander without losing board presence while doing so, Filigree Vector, whose ETB +1/+1 and charge counter distribution is great for enabling our commanders proliferate, and then we can use it to continue proliferating alongside him as a sack outlet to multiply our counters even further, Blight Titan, who provides us with even more passive incubation as it ETBs and swings in to grow our board even further at no mana cost turn after turn, and a Darksteel Splicer, whose easy to proc tribal token creation generates a staggering 10/10 worth of stats as soon as it comes down, and allows us to either build massive board states of indestructible bodies that we can use to swing in with, or that we can use as sack fodder to generate value and continue proccing our commander as we summon more and more Phyrexians, often doing both. We'll also be holding on to Vulpine Harvester, who, despite us moving into a Phyrexian Tribal direction, still provides solid reanimation for the relatively large number of utility artifacts we'll be keeping or adding to the build, which is nice to have in our back pocket in case our opponents start picking apart our back row. Then moving on to some of our held over classic Phyrexians, Casket the Flesh Sculptor will hang on to his spot as a manaless sack outlet and repeatable source of card advantage to keep our hands topped off while proccing our commanders proliferate. Bone Shredder stays in as an on-theme piece of spot removal on a body that sacks itself away on the following turn to proc our commander and other on-death payoffs for additional value. Massacre Worm retains its position as a non-destruction mini-wipe and then source of passive life loss for our opponents as their creatures die off to continue piling on the damage. Phyrexian Delver carries over as a reanimation spell on a tribal body that helps us bring back any Phyrexians that have been removed by our opponents or sacked away by us for value. And Phyrexian Rager will keep its spot as a tribal body to trigger our commander's incubate while allowing us to dig deeper into our deck while doing so. We'll then also be hanging on to Soul of New Phyrexia, whose combination of big stats, built-in trample and repeatable AoE protection for our entire board make it a solid top end to crack in for damage, and keep our hard-earned board states intact against our opponent's removal and wipes from both the battlefield and the graveyard. And lastly, as the only pair of non-Phyrexians that held over from the core build, Bloodline Pretender will stay in as an honorary Phyrexian thanks to Changeling that can grow itself with counters over time as more and more Phyrexians enter play, which our commander and other sources of proliferate can multiply to make it even stronger, and Burnished Heart retains its spot as an artifact creature that still procs our commander's incubate while giving us access to land-base ramp in our colors to speed up and fix our mana base. Then moving on to our instant carryovers, we'll exclusively be focusing on keeping the best removal pieces this category has to offer, with Swords to Plowshares, Despark, and Excise the Imperfect all staying in as efficient sources of exile-based removal to deal with otherwise destruction immune and/or reanimation prone creatures and/or permanents. It's then on to our sorcery holdovers, or should I say holdover, as only Night's Whisper made the cut from the core build, which serves as a solid low-cost source of draw that's useful in the early game to ensure we make our land drops and get to our commander as quickly as possible. Then skipping over enchantments, as none from the base build made it into the final build, we'll dive right into our retained artifacts, which will entirely consist of mana rocks and ramp sources to speed up and or fix our mana base, with Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Orzhov Signet, Talisman of Hierarchy, and Mind Stone, all staying in as cheap rocks that help us get to our commander as quickly as turn 3 if we're able to open with them. Wayfarer's Bauble holding on to its spot as a cheap source of land-based ramp to further speed up and fix our colors, and Bitterhorn Nissa's Animist retaining its position as well thanks to being a Sword of the Animist on a tribal body that we can use to continually fetch up lands from our deck, and that eventually will give us a free Brimaz Proliferate trigger whenever it's eventually blocked or we move it away from its original 0/0 Phyrexian germ host to a sturdier or more evasive body to continue swinging in with. And finally, reaching our land-based carryovers, we'll start off with our kept mana lands, in which we'll be hanging on to Command Tower, Fetid Heath, Shine Shadow Snarl, Silverquill Campus, Tainted Field, and Temple of Silence, as lands that tap for both our colors to improve our mana base's consistency, Path of Ancestry, which also taps for both our colors while also providing repeatable card selection as we cast our Phyrexian creatures with its mana, and Evolving Wilds and Terramorphic Expanse, which give us access to even more fixing with their land fetching. Then quickly going over our kept utility lands, we'll of course be hanging on to Karn's Bastion as an excellent source of proliferate from our land slot to further multiply our counters, but Jukabog will stay in as a staple silver bullet against any graveyard-focused builds we may encounter thanks to its ETB Graveyard Exile, and Vault of the Archangel will keep its spot as a means to grant our Phyrexians and Phyrexian tokens the means to stabilize our life totals as well as take down any blockers that intercept them, the latter working particularly well with the toxic Phyrexian Mite Token generating sources we'll be adding to the build in our upgrades. And finally, we'll be keeping 10 plains and 12 swamps from the base build as our basics to round out our mana base. That leaves us with a final tally of 59 cards including basic lands we'll be keeping from the base build, leaving us with a staggering 41 cards to replace, which is admittedly much more than I normally would swap for a Precon upgrade, since it's more or less rebuilding the deck from scratch at that point, but with the Precon being so directionless out of the box, I feel it's absolutely necessary to make significant changes to it to elevate it to even a somewhat playable state. So, now that we've covered all the cards that made the cut from the core build, let's move on to our upgrades. Starting off with our new creature additions, we'll first begin by cutting most of the non-Phyrexian artifact creatures in the core build in favor of additional Phyrexians that synergize better with our playstyle. For example, on the incubation side of things, we'll be cutting Mere Battlesphere's artifact token creation in favor of Essence of Orthodoxy, which serves as another tribal source of incubator tokens to further grow our board and be empowered by our commander, axing Angel of Ruin's far too expensive removal for Progenitor Exarch, who not only gets us additional incubators into play depending on how much mana we pump into it, but also lets us bring those tokens online at no mana cost to speed up our game plan, and scrapping Ancient Stone Idol to make room for Norn's Inquisitor, who provides additional ETB incubation and further supports our incubator tokens by pumping them up even further as we transform them to make them even deadlier. From there, we'll then move on to refining our removal options by shelving Noxious Gearhulk and Meteor Golem, who are a bit too pricey for us to hardcast in this build for the removal they provide, and replacing them with Stronghold Assassin and Skin Renderer, both of which are cheaper and synergize with our game plan better by either being a repeatable sack outlet or distributing -1/-1 counters we can proliferate respectively, and trading Duplicant and its ETB removal for the AoE -1/-1 counter distributing Carnifex Demon, who can weaken and eventually wipe entire boards alongside our commander and other proliferation sources. Then as our last artifact to Phyrexian creature swaps, we'll be smelting down the artifact payoffs Shimmermere and Scrap Trawler for the more on theme Attentive Skywarden and Grafted Butcher, who provide us with either another means to transform our incubator tokens for free or an AoE tribal stat bump and sack outlet respectively, and reprocessing Cataclysmic Gearhulks to indiscriminate board wipe into Terror of Tawashi, whose on-attack reanimation is a decent way for us to return our sacked and or destroyed Phyrexians back into play. Then with all the artifact creatures swapped out, we'll switch our focus to refining the Phyrexians we already have in the core build into ones that better fit our proliferate heavy game plan. With the one-time Phyrexian token creators Blade Splicer and Master Splicer being traded for Mite Overseer and Rhea Ivor Bane of Bladehold, both of which can repeatedly produce toxic Phyrexian tokens for us to distribute poison counters as they connect, or trigger our commanders proliferate as they're blocked or sacked away, on top of making our transformed incubator tokens even deadlier by granting them first strike, or providing an AoE stat bump to our entire board thanks to Battlecry. The two inefficient draw source Phyrexian Gargantua being reprocessed into Basilica Shepherd for even more Phyrexian Mite token creation to use as sack fodder and distribute poison on an evasive body that can reliably crack in for damage as well. The two historic focus legendary Moira and Tashar being swapped out for Aaron Benalia's Ruin, who serves as another sack outlet that this time loads up our non-incubate creatures with +1/+1 counters for Brimaz to proliferate, or grows our transformed incubate tokens even more. The two draw focus Psychosis Crawler being replaced with Ichor Rats, whose ETB poison counter distribution puts all our opponents on a clock as soon as they come down thanks to our commander and other sources of proliferate, and Shattered Angel's lackluster life gain being replaced by the better Phyrexian Angel, Norn Squiremaster, who gives us access to even more proliferate as our commander ETBs and attacks to multiply our counters even faster. And quickly running down the remainder of our Phyrexian creature upgrades, we'll replace First Sphere Gargantua's ETB cantrip with Defiler of Faith, whose cost reduction helps us get to a good chunk of our creatures that much faster, and whose passive token creation, while not Phyrexian, can still be used to enable a good number of our sack outlets and on-death payoffs if we don't have the Phyrexians on hand to sack. Cut the sack outlet Phyrexian Ghoul for the even better sack outlet Flesh Eater Imp, who's evasive, spreads poison counters thanks to Infect, and still serves as a free sack outlet to enable Brimaz. Scrap the 2-mana intensive Phyrexian Triniform in favor of Bloated Processor, which is another sack outlet that enables our commander, procs our payoffs, grows itself with counters, and even leaves behind an incubator token when it's finally dealt with. Axe the Graveyard Recurring Grave Shifter to make room for Banalish Sleeper, who's effectively a 3-mana AoE Edict effect that works well alongside our commander by proccing his Incubate as it ETBs and his Proliferate as it sacks itself for another Phyrexian to its effect, and to trade the somewhat strange inclusion Scytheclaw for the toxic mana dork Mere Convert, who speeds up our mana base even further while occasionally being able to inflict our opponents with poison counters if the opportunity presents itself for Brimaz to spread. Then proceeding to our instant upgrades, we'll be refining our core stats even further with some more on-theme entries by replacing the decent but expensive removal spell Utter End with the Edict of Vraska's Fall, which serves as both AoE non-destruction removal to disrupt all our opponent's boards and AoE poison counter distribution to start the clock on the victory through poison game plan, and cutting the generic draw spell Ambition's cost and the now unnecessary artifact clone Sculpting Steel for Corrupted Conviction and Village Rights, which provide instant speed card advantage and the means to sack our creatures on our opponent's turns for us to trigger our commanders proliferate ourselves. Our sorcery upgrades will then continue to bolster our core stats by replacing the massively overcosted Mana Rock and Draw Source coveted Jewel for the more on-brand Infectious Inquiry, which still provides decent card advantage while again spreading poison counters to our opponents so we can start proliferating them, and trading the serviceable Wipe Phyrexian Rebirth for the more flexible White Sun's Twilight, which we can also use to wipe the board if necessary, leaving us with a mass of toxic bodies when we do so to swing in with afterwards, but also gives us the option to just get more bodies on board if we don't need to wipe the board but do need additional sack fodder or ways to distribute poison counters. And speaking of poison counters, we have a few more sources of them joining us as we reach our enchantment upgrades, in which the admittedly solid reanimation spells Victimize and Yawgmoth's Vile Offering will be exchanged for Norn's Decree and Skrelv's Hive, giving us even more ways to poison our opponents as they either attack into us or we attack into them with the tokens we create, with the former also providing card advantage as we swing into poisoned opponents as a bonus, while the latter's repeatable tribal token generation gives us access to even more Phyrexian bodies and tribal death triggers for our commander and other sources to make use of. And as our final enchantment swap, we'll be removing Phyrexian Scriptures, whose artifact-focused wipe is no longer very useful to us in this build, and adding in Etchings of the Chosen, which provides a solid stat bump to our Phyrexian creatures on top of serving as a cheap sack outlet that we can use to protect our more powerful tribe members by sacking away weaker ones in their place, all while proccing our commanders proliferate in the process. Then reaching our new artifact additions, we'll start off by overhauling our ramp package to better suit all the proliferation we'll be doing, with the overcosted Mana Rock Sacred Elixir and Hedron Archive being shelved in favor of Ever-Flowing Chalice and Astral Cornucopia, which we can pay a minimum of 2 or 3 respectively to put a single charge counter on them and then grow their counters over time as we proliferate so they tap for more and more mana. The slow Mana Rock Fractured Power Stone being swapped out for Tablet of Completion, which may initially be even slower but does eventually come online as a mana rock as well as a repeatable source of card advantage as we grow the oil counters on it, and the generic rock commander sphere being scrapped for the much more on-theme Staff of Completion, which still provides the same ramp and fixing but also can be used to destroy our own creatures to proc Brimaz, proliferate to multiply the counters on the field, or even draw us cards to keep our hands topped off, provided of course we have the life to spend. And while on the topic of proliferating, we'll also be exchanging out the solid removal spell Go for the Throat and the decent reanimation spell Path of the Schemer for Contagion Clasp and Throne of Geth, both of which serve as repeatable sources of proliferate to get even more mileage out of our counters, while also either providing -1/-1 counter distribution or serving as a repeatable sack outlet respectively. Then switching gears to refine our draw package, we'll be axing the now unnecessary artifact payoffs Nettle Cyst and Spire of Industry to make room for Weatherlight Completed and Norn's Wellspring, each of which initially provide on-death card selection to help smooth out our draws as our creatures are sacked or destroyed, and, as they accumulate counters, will either evolve into an evasive 5/5 that draws us cards as our creatures die off, or serve as yet another source of repeatable card advantage respectively, and cutting the mediocre Mana Rock Orzhov Signet for the equipment Skull Clamp, which cheaply draws us cards as we sack away our creatures via our sack outlets or as we equip it to our 1/1 Phyrexian Mites to proliferate. And as our final artifact upgrade, we'll be slotting out a spare swamp to slot in Vat of Rebirth, which serves as another on-death payoff that we can build up via our commander and other proliferation sources to reanimate our creatures over and over again. And then quickly going over our singular new battle addition to the build, we'll be trading out the decent generic removal spell Mortify for the more on-game plan focused Invasion of New Capenna, whose front face still provides decent removal in addition to being a sack effect to trigger our proliferate, and whose back face is a superb source of +1/+1 counters for our tribal deck to take advantage of to make our boards even taller. And at last, reaching our land upgrades, we'll be terraforming the artifact land Goldmire Bridge into Myriad Landscape to give us one last piece of land-based ramp to improve our mana base with, and converting the Mana Land Exotic Orchard into the tribal token generating Mirix to give us the option to deploy sack fodder and or poison bodies from our land slot should we need them. So, now that we've covered all 41 cards that we've upgraded from the core build, let's take a look at the breakdown for this Precon upgrade. This deck currently has 34 creatures including the commander, 6 instants, 3 sorceries, 3 enchantments, 17 artifacts, 0 planeswalkers, 1 battle, and 36 lands. Looking at the stats that matter to our game plan, we have 33 Phyrexians, 7 sources of non-incubator Phyrexian tokens, 11 cards that care about Phyrexians, 13 sack outlets and effects, 6 sources of incubate, 10 sources of poison counters, 13 sources of other types of counters, and 7 sources of repeatable proliferate, leaving us with a sturdy backbone of Phyrexian bodies to proc our commanders' incubate and proliferate focused game plan with a variety of payoffs to empower them and or generate additional value from them, various means to sack our Phyrexians and trigger our commanders' proliferate on our own terms, and a wide variety of poison and non-poison counter generators and distributors, including +1/+1, -1/-1 oil and charge counters to grow with our commander, alongside other sources of proliferate to grow them even faster. For general deck stats, we have 14 ramp sources, 11 card draw sources, 10 targeted removal sources, and 3 board wipes, giving us a pretty by-the-numbers ratio of core stats with no real outliers. Looking at our mana curve, we have 2 0-drops, 8 1-drops, 18 2-drops, 18 3-drops, 8 4-drops, 5 5-drops, 4 6-drops, and 1 7-drop, leaving us with a lighter weight curve that aims to get our commander out as quickly as possible, followed by Phyrexian bodies to trigger his incubate and counter-producing sources to set up the initial groundwork for his proliferate. Then from there, we simply need to use our sack outlets at least once per turn to trigger our proliferate as much as possible, and, alongside our other sources of proliferate, our opponents will either fall under our gigantic board of incubated Phyrexians or succumb to the poison in their veins. The final price of this build then comes out to be $74.43 after upgrades. This price does not include tax or shipping and assumes that the price you paid for the Precon was $40. The price of the cards was calculated by using the cheapest listed marketplace price on TCG Player at the time of this recording. For side grades, Mere Convert can be exchanged for Scheming Aspirant if we want to reduce our ramp and ability to inflict poison in order to be able to inflict more normal damage as our commander and other sources proliferate. Etchings of the Chosen can be replaced with Phyrexian Censor if we want to slow down our opponent's game plans rather than empowering our own. And a Terror of Tawashi can be traded out for Sunfall if we'd rather have an additional wipe in the build with built-in incubates to retake control of the board over the repeatable reanimation of its predecessor. Then for further upgrades, Basilica Shepherd can be reprocessed into Phyrexian Vindicator to provide us with an even bigger evasive body alongside damage protection and redirection to intercept attacks with or punish players who block it. Bloodline Pretender can be scrapped and repurposed into Phyrexian Obliterator to provide powerful permanent removal if our opponents dare inflict damage onto it. And Defiler of Faith can be augmented into Shouldered Whispering One to give us access to passive edict removal and or free reanimation every turn to disrupt our opponent's boards while enabling our game plan. And finally, we can cap off our upgrades by sending Carnifex Demon, Banalish Sleeper, and Keskit the Flesh Sculptor back for reprocessing, and slotting in the legends Elish Norn, Mondrak Glory Dominus, and Elish Norn Grand Cenobite in their stead, all of which are fantastic additions by either providing additional incubation support and a one-sided tribal wipe, doubling the amount of incubator tokens both our commander and other sources can create, or by powering up our board even further while simultaneously shrinking or outright destroying our opponent's boards, making these legends almost worth the legendary price tags that come along with them. Thanks everyone for sticking around until the end of the video. Yet again, I'd like to take a moment to thank all of you fine folks who have been signing up for the 10K giveaway and subscribing. As thanks to you, as of time of recording, the channel has reached its 11K subscriber milestone and is well underway or possibly even surpassing 11.1K by the time it's uploaded. So sincerely, thank you all for helping the channel continue to grow. And if you haven't signed up for the giveaway already, be sure to do so either via the card on this video or in the link in the description for a chance to win a $100 Urtet Remnant of Memnarch deck built by me, along with various unlocked accessories and upgrades for it before the deadline on April 29th. Now, with the growing threat precon covered, the next precon upgrade we'll be tackling will be for Divine Convocation and its face commander, Kozla the Broken Halo, so look forward to a go-wide Convoke heavy upgrade for the build coming soon. And lastly, before we close out, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't done so already, as this channel can't continue to grow without your support. And if you feel like showing your thanks by keeping me caffeinated while I make these videos, please consider buying me a coffee at the link in the description. And if any of you would like to support the channel in a different way, feel free to check out the other deck techs floating around my head if you'd like to see the latest builds, or click on the link above for a playlist of all the Cut Rate Commander episodes I've made so far. And with that, have a good one folks, and stay safe.